Hi, welcome in Java Basic course, day 4. Today we're going to discuss IO streams, serialization, JDBC connection, and a demo on all above. So let's get started. Java IO streams are flow of data to read and write, and it is connected with a data source, file, network connection, database. So if you need to write the data from the file, or you need to write the data from the database, or you need to write it to the network connection or to the file or database, we need to use IO streams in Java. Input and output byte streams are 8 bits. The major examples of input and output byte streams are file input stream, file output stream, object input stream, object output stream, and there are some other wrappers around that we will discuss later. Input and output character streams are 16 bits, and the major examples are BufferedReader, BufferedWriter, FileReader, FileWriter, and there are many others which we will discuss in the demo. So the basic classes for file IOs, as we mentioned earlier, are file input stream used for reading from a file, file output stream is used for writing to a file. So the example is we need to open a file, so you need to specify the file name for reading, and then you say file input stream, the instance name, new file input stream, and the file name, right? So this will open the file. So this file input stream will open a file for a writing, and if you need to do some writing bit on that file, so you need to define file output stream, and then you again you specify the constructor of that with the file name. So by this you can open a file and you can start writing to that file. So the above file input stream is for reading from the file, and then the below file output stream is for writing to the file. Let's take an example. So we want to get contents from the file and want to print those contents onto the console. So we need to import a class called java.io. So this is java.io class. I'm creating my own class for the demo purpose. So file to out1, and then inside the main method I'm creating one file input stream. Right, I named it in file, and then this is the text file which I'm going to associate with the file input stream. Then I'm creating a byte, a buffer array, right? And so this is array of bytes which of size 50, and then initialize the int which is going to read the bytes, right? And then I'm using the do while loop. So this is my do while loop. This will run at least once. So it will going to take whatever inside the file. It is going to read it into the buffer, then assign it to the variable, and then going to print out that buffer, and then the characters it reads, right? And it will continue until it will reach to end of that file. So buffer dot length, right? So end of that buffer. So when we open this file, there are chances that this file not found, right? So the system will throw an exception, and this is a checked exception, so we need to handle that exception. So that's why we're doing everything in inside try block, because we need to handle that in a catch block and say file not found exception, and then we're going to print that error that the file is not found, right? So by this way we can get the contents of the file, and then within a loop of that one we can display to the console. So in a streams we do have a filter. So once a stream example file has been opened, we can attach filters to it. So filters make reading and writing more efficient. The most popular filters are data input stream and data output stream. They are for basic types, for like we have primitive types or dates, these kind of things. And if you have objects and you want to read and write objects from the file, you need to use ObjectInputStream and ObjectOutputStream. So writing data to a file using a filters, it is very simple. It's very similar the thing we did before. So we have one file output stream and associated to that file, and this file output stream is throw file not found exception. So we need to catch that exception here, right? And then we are creating data output stream. The data output stream. This is the filter, right? So in data output stream, we're saying that we need to write a very specific type of data. So we want to write int, right? We want to write double and then again double, and then after that we need to close that. So we're going to close data output stream, the filter, and then we're going to close the file output stream, right? So this is the way you can add a filters, right? So you can specify that I want to write a specific data onto the file. So let's say you want to say I want to write int, and inside if you specify a string, this will throw an error because you specified that it will only write an int or write a double or write float or write your own object. That need to be very specific for that kind of filter. So this is the main purpose of a filter, that you can filter out the data for the reading purpose or for the writing purpose. So reading data from a file using filters, it is again very simple. So you need to define one file input stream, associate a file with it, right? And then you need to use a filter data input stream. That data input stream will take the file input stream. It will be like a wrapper class, and then you'll say I only want to read an integer from that filter. So it will say read int and assign that int to n, and then we're going to print out this, right? And then after that we're going to have a one for loop in which I want to check how many integers are there. So I say I is less than n, and now I'm going to print out these values here. After that I'm going to close data input stream and then file input stream. I can do the closing into the finally block, but if you're not doing it there, that's fine. We can close those things here. But the good practice is use a finally block, as we discussed earlier in exception day, that you can use finally clause, and the finally will run in any case, either it is true or false. By that it means even there is no error thrown, the finally will be run, or even the exception is thrown, the finally will be run. So finally is normally used to clean up the data or clean up resources or close the files or close the streams, right? So this is the pretty much for reading data for a file using a filters. Now we need to discuss the serialization and deserialization. So serialization is a process in which representation of an object into a binary format, right? So we read object, we convert it into the binary, and we save it to the file or some other network connections or to the SQL via JDBC. So deserialization is opposite of serialization, is representing binary data to an object. So when you read the data from the file or from the network connection, you get that data into a binary format, and then you need to represent back into the object into your model classes. So thus you need to deserialize the data back into your system. An object can be serialized and deserialized if the class implements the serializable interface. So at this point we don't know what the interface are because we haven't gone through that interface part. So just keep this in your mind that if you want to serialize your model or your class, that need to implement serializable interface. When we go to the object-oriented programming, we will discuss what the interfaces are, how do we implement those interfaces. So everything will be discussed there. So don't worry about too much about the interfaces. Just keep in your mind, if you need to serialize the data, you need the class need to be have the implementation for serializable interface. Then there is one thing we normally use called transit keyword. The transit keyword, it is used to mark the field that is exempt from the serialization. So the value of transit field will not be persist. So for example, you have a class of employee, right? And within a class of employee, you have a name, surname, age, ID number, telephone number. And one of the thing, let's say you don't want to save the age for that employee, or some sensitive data for that employee when something is serialized or deserialized. So what you can do, you can mark that field or the variable as a transit value. When it's transit, it means it's not available for serialization. So when you try to save the whole object, the value of that field will not be persist or not will be saved into the file or the database. So that's the main purpose of a transit keyword, where we don't want to save that value. Mostly we have those value from the database and we don't save that file temporarily within the files. So let's go through an example of for write an object. So we have created one class called write date. It is going to write a date into a file. So date is an object. This is a date, new date. It is, when we say new date, it is created today's date, and we're going to create a file output stream and associate one file to it. And after that we're going to create one object output stream. So this is a wrapper, right? It means that it will only save or persist objects, right? Because we want to save object, date is an object, so we need to have object output stream, and then we associate that file output stream to the object output stream, and then we're going to start writing to the object. So from the object output stream we have one method variable called write object. So we say s.write object, and then we specify which object we want to write. So we want to write this date in it, and then we close that filter or stream. And then one thing we're missing, that we are not closing this, so we should close the file output stream as well. And then we need to catch exceptions, IO exceptions, right? And then we're calling that method which we defined here, right? We're calling that method within our main method. So if we need to read that date back from the file which we have written earlier, what we need to do is pretty much simple. So we need to define file input stream, right? Associate a file to it, and then we're going to say that the file will have object input stream. So this is a filter class, right, which will take a wrapper of the file input stream. So this file input stream is also associated to it, and then we're going to assign it to s, because s is already here. You see object input stream already here, right? And then after that we have few catch blocks, because it's a class not found exception, invalid class exception, stream corrupted exception, of optional data exception, and IO exception. So these kind of exception can occur when we're going to read it from there. So when we go into the try block, we need to assign that date. So this date variable which is null here, that need to be assigned here. So say d is equal to s dot read object, right? So that's from object input stream, we're going to read an object this time, and then once we read an object, we're going to assign it to the date, and then we can print out later on. And this is the place inside our void main we're calling that method which we have defined here. We'll discuss more in detail during a demo, so don't worry too much about it. JDBC. So JDBC is a Java API to connect and execute the query with the database. So there are few steps we need to follow for JDBCs. Right? JDBC is normally used when your program need to save something into any kind of database. It can be Oracle, MySQL, or SQL Server. If you want to save anything, retrieve anything there, or delete anything or modify anything, you can use a JDBC connection, right? So there are few steps you need to follow. The step one is you need to load the driver class. So when you create a JDBC connection, you say class.4name and then the name of your driver. So, and then the second step is you create the connection object. So first you have a driver and then you have a connection object. Within a connection object, you need to specify that where your database is. So in my case, it's on what kind of database is MySQL, where it is located. So it is located on localhost 8080, and what is the name of that database. So I say just DB name, and then I need to specify the user, like which user is using that database for access level and what is the password of that one. After creating a connection, I need to create a statement object. So the statement object can be created through the connection object. So we say statement will be created a connection dot create statement, right? And then step 4 is we need to execute that query. So we say result set. So whatever the result is coming back from the query, that need to be stored into result set. And then we say from statement execute query, and then we specify the query we normally specify in a SQL, say select star from employee, which means get everything from the employee table. And then we're going to get a result. So let's say you have 4 or 5 rows coming from the employee table, and we need to iterate through to print those. So say rs.next. So whenever we have the next row available, we need to go inside that and print it. So when you say print, we say rs.getInt first, right? So that's first mean, let's say the employee has ID, like name and department, right? So the ID is integer, name is a string, and department is a string. So what we're saying here, from the result set, from the first row, get the first column which is integer, which is ID. So this is associated with this. Then we're saying get the string 2. The 2 means what is the thing which is coming on the second column, that is a type of string. So this will associate it with this one. And the third one, let's say rs dot get string, so the third column, and which is a type of string, which is this one. So you get all the first row, and it will iterate until it will reach to the last row, and everything will be printed here. And after that, the last step is we need to close the connection object. So we say connection dot close. So for filtered query, we need to use a prepared statement rather than just a statement. So the syntax is, we say prepare statement, connection dot prepare statement, select whatever you want to select. So in our case, we're selecting age from employee table where name is equal to. So this actually is a filter. This is called a filter, right? And we need to assign the filter value somehow. So after creating a prepare statement, we need to say the prepare statement dot set string. So set string is mean this is a string value, and this is the index 1 means the first one. Let's say you have a two where conditions where name is equal to this and id is equal to another thing, right? So this means this id will be taken as a second index because the first index is name. So this is the first index, and we specify what value. Normally this value is coming from the user or from some filters, but we can hard code those values as well. So this is for a string if you want to set a string, but let's say id is an integer and you want to specify that value as a filter. You say prepare statement dot set int and then index, right? So in this case the index will be 2, and then specify the value. For example, you need to look for id 10, so you say id 10. Yeah, and this way you can use the prepare statement to do the filtration or use the where clause when you need to filter that data. So let's have a demo and we'll discuss more in detail what we have learned so far. So we have created one class called day4demo. Inside that class we have a static void main method to run our streams methods. So in order to save the time, what I've done, I've created few methods. The first method is going to write a bytes to a file, and the file name is btest, and then we're going to read that bytes from that file. So read bytes from file, and this is the file name we have specified. So let's jump into the, the methods. So first, say write bytes to file. So it is looking for one argument, which is a string, and then the bytes we want to write to the file is say a b c, and then we are going to have one file output stream, because with the file output stream we can write the bytes to the file and then associate with the file name. And after that we're going to use a method called write. Inside that write we need to specify what we want to write. So we want to write array of bytes and say, okay, starting from which index. So starting from index 0, which is a at index 0, and then we say we need to write up to the length of that array. So bytes dot length, which will be 3 in this case. So this is the length of that array. And then this we need to catch the exception, which will come through file output stream. So it will be file not found exception. We need to catch that, and then when we're going to write it to the file, there is a chance that we have IO exception. When we try to input output exception kind of thing can happen when we try to write it. So we need to catch that exception. So this is the way we can write a bytes to a file. Let's see how we read that bytes from the file. Okay, so read bytes from file is pretty much simple. So we're going to try file input stream and then new file input stream. So this thing, if you remember from exception course, that we mentioned that this is called try with resource. And what it means, if you don't use a finally block, whatever the resource we're going to open or use it here, it will be automatically closed by the JVM, right? So that's why they are specified inside the brackets here within a try block. And then we're saying while I is equal to file input stream dot read is not equal to -1. -1 means end of file. Then I need to read, then need to print that character. So it will going to print character by characters, because we are casting to the character. So that's because we know it will contain a characters array, so we are casting to that. And then again file not found exception, and then IO exception going to be cached. So let's run this and see the output. I'm going to delete that files just for time being to see that they're newly created files. So those files are deleted. We don't have any files here. I'm going to run it. Okay, so when you run this, you see the output is coming ABC, which is actually we written here in the file, and then we reading in this method. And if I refresh this project, you'll see the file is created automatically called btest. And if I open that one, I can see the content inside. So ABC is written there. Okay, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to comment this code to write bytes to file and read bytes from file, and I'm going to uncomment this code. So here are two methods called write characters to file. So now we're going to write a characters to file, and then we're going to read characters from file, and the file name is C test. It will be automatically created when we run that method. So I'm going to save this, and let's go to the methods. Okay, so first we need to write characters to a file. So what we're doing, we are creating a one file object and giving it a file name, and then we're using a FileWriter stream. That FileWriter will be associated to the file. So out is a file, and then we're going to write something. So say writer, which is this instance of our FileWriter, and we're going to say write whatever we want to write. So I say writing character, it will write this writing character to the file. After that we need to flush that to the stream, right? So we flush whatever the content we wrote it, we need to flush it to the stream so it will be reachable to the file, and we need to catch IO exception. So by this way we can write the characters to the file. Let's see how we read it from the file. So again, file instance associated to the file name, then this time file reader because we need to read it, and then file reader will associate it to that file object, and after that we start reading. So within a while loop we say I is integer, we define it, and if it's not end of file, which is -1 is end of file, then we need to read those, and then what we need to do, we need to read those in the characters and print it on the console, right? So let's run this one and see the impact. So you see the writing character, so that's the output coming from here, which we wrote it in this method. So let's refresh this and refresh the project, and you see the new file is created, C test. If you open that file, you see the contents are there. So writing character, yeah. Okay, we have seen so far how to write bytes and read bytes from the file, how to write characters to the file and read characters from the file. Now we need to see how we can write an object to a file and read an object from that file. So I'm going to comment this code. Right, and I uncomment this write object to file and read object from file. And if I come to my methods, so write object to file, so we have one file output stream because we need to write it to the file, so we need output stream. We associate with the file name, and then because we need a kind of filter, because at this point we're not writing a primitive types, we're going to write an object, so we need to get a filter, so it's called object output stream, and object output stream will be associated with the file output stream. Now I'm going to create a student, so I've created one class called student. The class has a constructor with take a name and the age, so this is a student instance, and I want to write that student instance to that class. So I'm saying output object output stream dot write object, and then write that student into that file. Now we need to catch file not found exception and IO exception raised by object output stream and the file output stream, and when we need to write the object we get IO exception. There is a chance so we need to catch those as well, right? So by this way we can write an object to the file, and after writing an object to the file we need to read the object from the file. So how we can read it? In a similar way, we need to have one file input stream for a reading, and then a filter which is object input stream, which is kind of a wrapper class, and this will be wrapped in file input stream. And then after that I'm just creating a one student instance which is null at this point, and then I start reading it. So I'm saying while keep reading is a flag, I'm using it to be true initially, but when it will reach end of file, it will be turned to false in here, right? So I'm going to get the value of this student, so the student, and then from the stream the read object, so it's going to read an object and then cast it to the student object and then assign to the student instance. And after that what I'm doing, I'm using a student dot toString method to display the content of that student. So what I need to show you at this point, so if I don't do this student dot toString, what will happen? This is the first thing we need to see. I'm going to show you what the student class look like. So this is the student class, right? I'm going to remove this part just to make things clear. So this is a student class which has a string name, integer age. This is a constructor, getters and setter methods, and then we have a toString method in it, and toString method will return student, which is just the class name, and the name variable, age, and the age variable. So let's run this and see what output we'll see. Okay, so let me maximize this to see what error is there. Okay, so the error is saying java.io not serializable exception student. So it means the student class cannot be serializable. What it means, we mentioned earlier into the lecture that if we need to serialize something or persist something, we need to implement a serializable interface, right? And in this student class, we need to serialize the student object, right? So we need to implement a serializable interface. How we do this? We say after the class name we say implements. So it implements serializable. That's all we need to say. So now I'm saying any student instance which we try to persist or save into a file or a database, that will be done automatically with that serializable interface. So now I'm going to save that and run it. So at this time there is no error, the instance is saved, and we're going to see that it is printing that student John and the age, right? So the name and that student. If I change this to toString, say save that and run it, it is giving you the same output. And the reason is, when you're using a student toString method or just a student, what is happening in student is any class which we normally create. It actually came from the object class, and the object class has a by default toString method in it. So that's why you see the student is coming into that format with any variable names, so John, and if and age is coming there as well. So that's the easiest way to see that the toString is coming from the object method, and you can override that method. I'm not going to emphasize too much on overriding at this point, because we don't know what the overridings are. We will study those into when we will go into the object oriented programming. So for that time we will see what are overloading, and how do we overload it, and what are overriding, and what is polymorphism. So these things will be discussed at that point. So just, I want to keep it very simple, just for the stream purpose, that what the streams are, how we can use it. I hope this makes sense, that how we can write an object to the file, right? So all we need to do, we, instead of having just file output stream, we need to have object output stream, and then we need to write an object to that stream. And if you need to read it, so you can read it. If you're using a multiple objects from the file, you need to do it in a while loop. If you're not reading multiple, if there is only one object, you can skip that while loop, and you can just write this line, and it will get you an object from that stream, cast it to the student, and then you get your student object, right? So I hope this is clear. Now I need to demonstrate what are the JDBCs and what are the requirements for that JDBCs. So I've created one class called JDBC. The name is not what we means JDBC. It can be any name. So you can say like my own JDBC or something like that. Just for the clarity, I just named it JDBC, right? And then inside that JDBC, I've created one method. You can create any kind of method, or you can create a constructor for that JDBC, and whenever someone is going to call that JDBC, you need to create an instance for that. And then you can say get students, or get age of the students, or get ID, whatever you want to do. So let's go one by one. Just for simplicity, I put everything in one method. Normally we create a constructor. In the constructor we specify the class for name and the connection. So these two normally we specify into the constructor, and the statement and result set will be in individual methods. So this get student is taking username and the password as an argument, and it is throwing SQL exception and class not found exceptions, right? What I'm going to do, I'm going to remove these two and see what error do you see now. So you see, if the class for name, you say add throws declaration, right? So there is class not found exception need to be handled or throws. So I'm saying okay, throws that one. And then you see another exception, unhandled exception type SQL exception. So I say add throws exception, and now all the errors are gone. So the step number one, we need to get a driver. So say class for name, and I'm connecting with the MySQL driver. So this is the MySQL driver. After that, I'm saying I need a connection from that driver. So say driver manager dot get connection. So it will get me a connection for JDBC. So this is JDBC MySQL. This is the localhost 8080 where my MySQL instance is deployed. Currently, we are not running the MySQL instance, but this will be the place. It can be your dev environment or UAT environment or a prod environment, but normally when we're testing it, we do it on localhost 8080. And then the name of the database, so it can be like student database or college database or the employee database, something like that. Then you need to specify which user is going to access that database. So that parameter is coming from your method, and then the password is coming from the method. Normally when we do the programming, we don't hard code thing like username and password, and we don't pass that value within the method variable. We create a properties file, and then we inject that through the properties file, right? Rather than going through hard coding, we specify externally application.properties, and then within application.properties we add those values and fetch those values here. We see those things when we study Spring. It will make much clear that how we read a properties file, and how do we auto-write those things where they are required. So after creating a connection, we need to create a statement. So statement is created from the connection. So say connection dot create statement. This will create a statement for us, and then on that statement I need to execute my query. So I say result set is statement dot execute query, and then say select star for employee, which means select everything from the employee. So at this point, the star means all the columns. So I'm assuming the employee has three columns. The first column has a type of integer. The second column is for string, and when we say a string, it means a varchar in database. And the third column is again a string in Java terms, but in SQL terms, this is a varchar. So I'm getting dot result set. So all the rows will be coming and iterate through the while loop, and then I'm going to print it. So the first rs.get int 1 means at index 1, so the column 1, which will be type integer. It will print that value. For example, it's id, so it will print integer number. And then the second thing is get string 2. Get string 2, this is the second column will be printed here, and let's say second column is a name, so the name will be printed as a second column. And the third column, take an example as a department, which is a string of varchar in MySQL. So varchar will be automatically converted to the string, and then this will be printed here. And after that, when we iterate all the rows, we need to close the connection, because if we leave the connection, then it is the resource will be wasted, and if someone else need that connection, they won't be able to get the connection. So we need to close that connection so the other methods or other applications can access in a similar way we are doing it within a JDBC framework. So that's we close. So these are the five steps we normally run through. As I don't have a SQL, MySQL running at this point, so I'm not going to run this program. But when we go for Springs, I will show you how we run the JDBCs, and we try to compare the JDBC with the Hibernate. So that at that point it will make clear for you that why we need rs.get int I, why I need to hard code everything here, because just a hint that the JDBC is not the relational mapping. So the objects are not directly mapped to the tables because they are two different structures. So that's why we need to specify, is it a int coming back, string coming back, date coming back, something like that. But when we use the hibernates kind of frameworks, but we don't need to specify this. We say, okay, it will be automatically mapped my object with the tables, and the table will be automatically mapped with the objects. So that's the benefit of using Hibernate. I hope I made it clear for you guys. If you have any question, please leave in a comment. Otherwise, see you in the next course where we're going to discuss more about the object-oriented programming, what encapsulations are, what is inheritance, and what is polymorphism. Thank you very much for watching. Have a good day. Bye. We have reached the end of day 4. Thank you very much for watching and see you in the next video. Till then, bye.